Let's keep going. Part 5, we're into the Lament of the Sailors. This is a little shorter part, kind of just 2 verses. Remember, this city, whoever she is, can be accessible by sea. Again, this doesn't mean it has to be right on the coast like New York, but it does mean that the sea plays into her business dealings. Her commerce somehow involves sailors who use their ships to bring cargo back and forth. And again, Jerusalem in the past, and I think even currently, still uses seaports to bring shipments of goods into Jerusalem. She doesn't have to be on the ocean like New York in order to have this feature any more than any other city that's close enough to the coast can do the thing that we're describing. So the verse talks about how that the sailors, those who transported goods by sea, they cry out, "What city is like the great city?" So again, they like the merchants are realizing that this is a loss of business. They throw dust on their heads, a sign of mourning, and they lament her destruction. This echoes Jonah 3:6, where dust on the head is a symbol of repentance. But here, it's not repentance. It's grief over lost income. And I say in my notes, once again, the theme is clear. The world mourns because its profits are gone, not because it loved righteousness. This ought to tell us something important. The world's loyalty is always about self-interest. When the city prospers, they cheer her on. But when she falls, they mourn their own losses. All right, let's turn now to the rejoicing. Part 6, heaven rejoices, verses 20 to 24. Now the tone shifts dramatically. While the earth mourns, I say, heaven rejoices. Rejoice over her, O heaven, and you saints and apostles and prophets, because God has pronounced judgment for you against her. And why? Why did God judge her? Because she shed the blood of prophets and saints. She killed God's messengers. We have to remember that whoever this city turns out to be, she is epicenter for the world's greatest tribulation that has ever been known. The greatest tribulation of Christians primarily, but also of Jews. So this alone would qualify her for the shedding the blood of prophets and saints label, if we're simply looking at sheer magnitude of tribulation activities or tribulation events that took place in the past. We know in the past that starting at least 2,000 years ago, Christians were slaughtered in mass, right? Just go back and read Fox's Book of Martyrs and you'll know what I'm talking about. We also know that Judaism has played the part of killing prophets that were sent to her. Yeshua lamented this in Matthew chapter 23. Jerusalem, Jerusalem, thou who stones the prophets and kills those who are sent to you. He weeps over Jerusalem. He wanted to embrace her as a mama hen embraces her chicks, but she wouldn't have any of it. So the judgment against her is just, because by this time of her destruction, she will have already been played the part of the greatest deaths of Christians ever. This is what Jesus says, is what Daniel says, right? She killed God's messengers. This confirms again that Mystery Babylon is Jerusalem, because Jesus said in Luke 13:33, it cannot be that a prophet would perish outside of Jerusalem. Now, I don't know if that should be taken hyper literally, because there are clearly prophets who died outside of Jerusalem, numerous prophets, but we have to try to understand what the force of what Yeshua's words could have meant. And again, we'll deal with that when I get to the objections. I don't want to deal with it right now. Let's keep going in our study. We've got about 13 minutes left. The chapter here in Revelation 18 closes with the angel describing her silence and desolation. Music, craftsmen, lamps, the voice of bride and bridegroom, all gone, total destruction. Again, I know what you're thinking. If it's total destruction, how can she be rebuilt as Jerusalem? We'll talk about it a different day. But let's just keep talking about the destruction. What's the reason for the destruction? In her was found the blood of prophets and of saints and of all who had been slain on the earth. Is God simply judging her because she got rich? that doesn't seem to be the totality of why he judges her. Understand what I'm saying? God's judgment is final, it's complete, and it's just. Part 7, let me circle back around again for a second. The call to God's people that we read about in verse 4 and 5. I want to come back around near the end of my commentary, and then we'll draw our study to a close. And so I say I want to circle back to one of the most important verses in this chapter, which is Revelation 18:4, which is the voice from heaven saying, "Come out of her, my people, so that you will not participate in her sins and receive of her plagues." God doesn't want to destroy the city with his people in it. This is both a command and a warning. God's people are called to separate from the harlot city, to leave behind compromise, idolatry, and alliances with evil, but also to just get out because God's going to judge them. God's going to judge the city, and God's wanting to protect his people. But notice that the warning to get up and get out echoes Jeremiah 51:45. "Come out of her midst, my people, and each of you save yourselves from the fierce anger of the Lord." So even in judgment, I say God shows mercy by calling his people out before the destruction calls, and we can make some application for us today. This is a call to spiritual separation, to refuse compromise with the world, to reject false religion, to stand apart from corruption. No matter where you are in the world, if you're a believer, you don't have to reside in Jerusalem in order to heed the call to get up and get out. If Jerusalem turns out to be Mystery Babylon, you don't have to be there. Wherever you are in the world, if this system of Mystery Babylon indeed covers the world in terms of religious corruption, political corruption, financial corruption, in other ways other than just being the physical city of Mystery Babylon, we know this system is going to affect other peoples of the world. No matter where you're at as a Christian, this is a call for spiritual separation. Refuse compromise with the world. Reject false religions. Stand apart from corruption. Let's close our study tonight. This is the closing application and preview of week 6. Won't take very long. What have we seen tonight? What bullet points did I want you to notice? Number 1, these aren't in any particular order, by the way. The great city is judged suddenly and completely. That's why her judgment is said to happen either in 1 day or 1 hour. It's pretty quick. Her sins piled up to heaven, point 2, and her pride led to her downfall. Point 3, kings, merchants, and sailors mourn her destruction, but only because they lost their profits. They're not really sad because God's city got destroyed or anything like that. Heaven rejoices, we saw tonight, but because God's justice has been carried out. Again, I know the pushback. Wow, that can't be Jerusalem, Ariel, because Jerusalem actually gets redeemed in the end. How can God destroy her and yet redeem her? We'll talk about it. Please give me time. We'll talk about it in a different study. But the last bullet point in my study here is that God calls his people to come out of her so that they will not share in her plagues. Let me just give you some closing thoughts and reminders. This chapter reminds us that the fall of Mystery Babylon is both a warning and a promise. It's a warning that judgment will fall on compromise and idolatry. It doesn't matter if it's a city or if it's an individual. A promise that God will vindicate his saints and bring justice at last. So we've got the warning of judgment, and then we've got the promise of vindication, right? This will play into helping me help you understand how Jerusalem could be this city. So what's going to happen next week? I'll just give you some kind of teasers. Next week in chapter 5, chapter 5, which is week 6. Next week in chapter 5, we'll step aside from the judgment scenes and look at Chris White's rebuttals to other popular interpretations like Rome, Mecca, Babylon, and more. We'll see why those views fall short and why Jerusalem remains the only consistent candidate for Mystery Babylon. We'll do that next week. Perhaps I might begin to deal with objections at that point in time as well. But let me leave you with these closing thoughts until next week, I want you to reflect on this. I'm speaking to Christians, okay? Are we living in such a way that we could answer God's call to come out of her without hesitation? How wrapped up in the world are you? How focused on God's kingdom are you? Could we come out if God calls us to come out? Or are we entangled in the world system, too attached to let go? This is a decision only you can make, by the way. So think about that. Thank you for joining me tonight. Keep watch, stay faithful, and rejoice. Why? Because the Lamb will overcome. Amen. Amen. That'll do it for Eschatology, a biblical study of end time events.